Hello and welcome back. We've been roaming through at will through the editor's introduction of the Portable Jung. We are on page number XIX. This is the Portable Jung, edited by Joseph Campbell. And we're picking back up where we left off. This is 0.07. As I saw it, a scientific truth was a hypothesis that might be adequate for the moment, but was not to be preserved as an article of faith for all time. The incompatibility of the two minds was clear, yet they contrived to work together until the next Congress in 1912 in Munich, where Freud was again overwhelmed by his Oedipal myth. Someone had turned to talk to Ikonen, suggesting that because of a negative attitude towards his father, he had destroyed his father's cartouches on the steels, and that in the back of his creation of a monotheistic religion there lay, therefore, a father complex. Okay, that's all of these are very dense. I don't know how to pronounce Ikanaton. Because a negative attitude towards his father, he had destroyed his father's cartouches on the steels. In the back of his creation of a monotheistic religion. Okay, so we have to figure out who this person is. Oh, it was Akhenaten. Akhenaten, the taken name by the pharaoh Amenhotep. Interesting. Akhenaten. From Imhotep to Akhenaten. We'll double back to that. Jung, irritated by such talk, responded that Akhenaten had held his father's memory in honor, that what his zeal had been directed against was the name of the god Amun. Interesting. So the zeal that had been directed against was the name of the god Ammon. Okay, so I'm getting sidetracked. But this was interesting. What zeal had been directed against was the name of the god Ammon. Other pharaohs had replaced their fathers' names with their own, feeling they had a right to do so as incarnations of the same god, yet they had not inaugurated a new religion. On hearing which words, Freud slid off his chair in a faint. Akhenaten held his father's memory in honor, and that what zeal had been directed against the name of the god Ammon. Other pharaohs had replaced their fathers' names with their own, feeling they had a right to do so as incarnations of the same god. Yet they had not inaugurated a new religion. On hearing which words, Freud slid off his chair in a faint. Many have held that the break in the friendship of these two was caused by Jung's publication of his altogether non-Freudian work, Symbols of Transformation, Collected Works, Volume 5, Part 1, 1911, Part 2, 1912. However, this was not quite Jung's own view, although the book certainly played a part. The only thing he saw in my work, Jung said in his talk with Dr. Belinsky, was resistance to the father, my wish to destroy the father. When I tried to point out to him my reasoning about the libido, his attitude toward me was one of bitterness and rejection. More deeply, however, as Jung went on to explain, it was my knowledge of Freud's triangle that became a very important factor in my break with Freud. And then he continued, I could not accept Freud's placing authority above truth. Jung's approach to the writings of his decisive and divisive work, Symbols of Transformation, commenced in 1909, the year of that trip to America. He had just begun his study of mythology, and in the course of the readings came across Friedrich Kreuzer's Symbolik und Mythologie der Artwunder, 1810 to 1823, which, as he declares, fired him. He worked like mad through a mountain of mythological materials contained through the Gnostic writers, and ended in total confusion. Then chanced on a series of fantasies of a certain Miss Miller of New York, published in Archives de Psychologie by revered friend Theodore Flournoy. series of fantasies of a certain Miss Miller of New York. He was immediately struck by the mythological character of the fantasies and found that they operated as a catalyst on the stored up ideas within him. He commenced writing, and as he told in later years of his composition of this pivotal work of his career, it was the explosion of all those psychic contents which could find no room, no breathing space in the constricting atmosphere of Freudian psychology and its narrow outlook. It was written at top speed amid the rush and press of my medical practice without regard to time or method. I had to fling my material hastily together just as I found it. There was no opportunity to let my thoughts mature. The whole thing came upon me like a landslide that cannot be stopped. Egyptian, Babylonian, Hindu, classical and Gnostic, Germanic and American Indian materials came clustering about the fantasies of a modern American woman on the brink of a schizophrenic breakdown, and Jung's experience in the course of this labor transformed his entire point of view with respect to the task of interpreting psychological symbols. Jung's experience in the course of this labor transformed his entire view of with respect to the task of interpreting psychological symbols. Jung's experience in the course of this labor transformed his entire point of view with respect to the task of interpreting psychological symbols. Hardly had I finished the manuscript, he states, when it struck me what it means to live with a myth. And what it means to live without one. Myth, says a church father, is what is believed always, everywhere, by everyone. Myth This is interesting. Myth, says a church father, is what is believed always, everywhere, by everyone. By everybody. Hence, the man who thinks he can live without myth or outside it is an exception. When we come back, we're going to jump back into this paragraph. Thank you for tuning in.